Getting off Marcy as we made our way to the Showfield Cobble was pretty quick, which was nice. Nice and easy, actually. And to give you an idea right now how deep the snow is here, once we're back in the tree line, the now entering the Alpine Zone sign was barely visible at our ankles. But nice and clear, blue sky, no clouds anywhere in the sky. I'm looking at Boreas Pond right now in the valley over there. Panther Gorge over here on my left. Skylight directly in front of me. It's shaping up to be a perfect day out here. The trail markers on the trees here were waist level or lower, and they're usually around eye level. I'm 6 feet tall, so this means the trail was about 3 feet higher than usual with the snow. And this 0.4 miles was fast, smooth, and soft. So we cruised on down, and in no time we all came out to the Four Corners. The Four Corners is where the Marcy Trail, Skylight Trail, and Elk Lake Trail from Panther Gorge all meet up in a little col. I'm in a col! It's a cool spot, and it has a nice wooden sign. So we went directly across the col and started making our way the 0.5 miles from the Four Corners to the top of Skylight. Skylight is actually the second most remote peak in the high peaks, second to Allen Mountain, which from the top of Skylight looks like it's really close together because they kind of sit next to each other. A lot of people list Skylight as their favorite peak, and they don't really think of it as being remote. But technically there's only one trail up this mountain, and the approach requires walking all the way from either the lodge or the upper works, the 6+ miles just to the Marcy Trail, and then up to the Four Corners, and then up to Skylight. But since this mountain is typically always paired as a Marcy Skylight Gray hike, it kind of blends in unnoticed. It gets all the praise without any of the pain. It's kind of like a tag-along mountain. It's still a great mountain, of course. And summit-wise, it's much more enjoyable than Allen. Though I think Allen is an entirely underrated high peak in general. The hike is great. But that's for another day. We followed the one set of snowshoe tracks from yesterday up this narrow trail towards Skylight. We again took turns leading. We weren't technically breaking trail, but from a physical standpoint, we might as well have been. It's not long into this 0.5 miles that you'll come out above the tree line and finish the hike above the trees. It's a similar summit and final approach as you get on Marcy, Algonquin, and Haystack in particular. Notice I just named the 3 highest peaks in the Adirondacks, and Skylight is number 4. So I'm seeing a little bit of a trend here. But once we came out of the tree line, we again followed a few cairns, and we were at the top around 9:15 a.m., looking at Marcy towering above to our left, as we each inevitably say to ourselves, "Man, we just came from there. Cool." In front of us to the south stood Allen Mountain, the Max to the right looking west, and then our final destination of the day, Gray Peak, directly behind us to the north. Mount Skylight, our second of 3 mountains on the day and the 4th tallest peak in the Adirondacks, standing 4,926 feet. Here we are on top of Skylight. Man, the wind is blowing harder than it was on Marcy. Nice and clear sky. Super awesome. Super windy. Looks like a different world up here. Everything completely covered in snow. Awesome. Pure ADK is an online community and lifestyle brand that creates Adirondack-inspired apparel and goods. They're all about sharing their adventures and creating quality products that are a reflection of the outdoor lifestyle and activities we love in the Adirondack Mountains. Whether born and raised an Adirondack native or a frequent vacationer, we all have a common bond, those feelings and memories that the Adirondacks evoke in us. As a bonus for listeners of the podcast, they're providing a 15% off discount. When shopping in their online store, use the promo code 46podcast to redeem the offer. PureAdirondacks.com. Check it out. 46podcast. Pure ADK. Exploration unbound. The wind, however, was once again howling like no other. In fact, it was worse than it was on Marcy. I didn't even take my backpack off this time because it helped to block some of the wind if I stood into it. I stood there admiring the rime ice covering the entire summit, making it look like frozen feathers everywhere, and making the small trees and rocks look like a sea of hundreds of 1 to 3 feet tall snowmen all over the place. an army of tiny snowmen people on top of Skylight. If you're not familiar, rime is a white ice that forms when the water in the air and the fog freezes to things, such as rocks or trees, typically on top of mountains. It's actually quite beautiful, and as I said, it looks like frozen white feathers everywhere. So more or less, rime ice is actually just frozen clouds sticking to the mountaintops. So that's cool. We stayed up here for about 20 minutes before deciding to head back down to the Four Corners where we're going to eat our lunch today. And we made it the 0.5 miles from the summit back to the Four Corners in a mere 12 minutes. Just cruised down, pretty much skied down on our snowshoes. A nice quick hike. And once again, that, my friends, is why people love Skylight so much. I mean, yeah, it has a great summit. We know that. We get that. But the amount of time most people are thinking about, quote, hiking Skylight is only really that mere 0.5 mile out and back. So in their mind, it doesn't really feel like much. That's my theory anyways. It's a tag-along mountain. It's still great, of course, don't get me wrong. But it's kind of like Marcy's little brother who just tags along with the older kids and his brother's friends. And then when big brother Marcy gets in trouble for sneaking into the movies, mom's only mad at big brother Marcy and lets little brother Skylight off the hook because he's young, he's little, he didn't know better. And then she only yells at Marcy because Marcy should have known better. That, my friends, is Skylight. And that is why people love it so much. It's also an incredibly easy climb during that 0.5 miles. So it's pretty much all glory on this mountain. Once we made it back to the Four Corners, it was time for a nice lunch break. And I don't know why I was psyched to be eating lunch here. If you've hiked in the high peaks, you've likely been here or will be at some point. And for some reason, it was just very satisfying hanging out, just the three of us, in this particular place, the Four Corners. While we were eating, we really took a good look and noticed the trail to Panther Gorge had a solid 4 feet of snow on it. Nobody's been on that trail for a long time. Definitely not broken out in the slightest. So if you want that challenge, have at it. We finished up our lunch and began the 0.3 mile trek down the Marcy Trail towards Lake Tier of the Clouds and Gray's Herd Path. I'd like to throw a shout out to whoever broke out this trail the day before we did. Much appreciated. We followed your snowshoe tracks for a good portion of the day today. And as we made our way down this delightful little fluffy woods trail, there was a small ditch to step over at one point. So I stepped over first without even thinking, just walked over it, no issue. And then as Jonathan stepped over, stepping just a mere inches to the side from where I did, he sunk a good 3 feet into the snow. It was a hole, deceivingly covered in snow, which was swallowing him whole.
And that's why we wear gaiters, everyone.
Jonathan is currently stuck in about maybe 2.5 to 3 foot hole that he is stepped in that was covered from the snow that basically ate him alive. But he appears to be making his way out of it, covered in what appears to be a frozen mud. So that's cool. Now Kira's going to jump across. Once Jonathan crawled out of that hole, we kept walking down the Marcy Trail and soon followed these snowshoe tracks right out onto Lake Tier of the Clouds, the start of the mighty Hudson River, which was super cool. Walking on the lake, saving time from going in the woods, and then being in that open area with a visual perspective of Marcy above that you really can't get in the summertime, unless you're in the water, of course. But after walking on the frozen lake, we came out to the Gray Herd Path, usually marked by a small cairn, but having just been here within the last few months, I remembered where it was pretty well. And like Skylight, from this junction, it's also just 0.5 miles to the summit. So without further ado, we just shot right up the mountain. We all felt Gray was going to be the hardest part of the day, and we were concerned we may have some trouble getting up this one. I don't have any ice crampons, but I was going up until I couldn't, and if some of the climbs ended up being too difficult, I'd turn around at that point. But as it would turn out, the trail up Gray was terrific and just covered in fluffy, fluffy snow. Towards the beginning of the trail after the initial climb, there's a small ledge to climb down, which Jonathan told me to not be a wuss and just butt slide down it. Just go down it, slide down it, go. Don't be a wimp, he says, which was something people hadn't done, and the tracks went around the ledge and the snow on the ledge was untouched. So after I chickened out, Kira stepped up like a champion and fearlessly slid right down and made it look easy. No problem. And then Jonathan slid down, but then I went around the ledge. I wasn't as brave today. After this point, the trail was super soft, so some of the steeper climbs were physically quite difficult, and quite annoying actually. Every step I'd take would require 3 tries because the snow kept giving out with every step, making it completely exhausting. But this was the story pretty much all the way up for me. There was something quite different about climbing Gray today though compared to the other 2 peaks. There was absolutely no wind here at all, and the temperatures were probably 20 degrees warmer. So it was quite warm now, maybe even 30 degrees, and no wind, just fantastic. Also, this peak on this day was actually easier to climb in the winter than it was in the summer, as is often the case on some mountains on some days. Kira made it to the summit first, and shortly after, Jonathan and I met up with her at the brown wooden sign with yellow lettering reading Gray Peak at 11:25. 4,840 feet elevation, standing on the 8th tallest mountain in the Adirondacks. It is 11:33. We made it to the top of Gray Peak, the final peak for the day. I'm standing next to the sign here on the summit. The sign is about waist height right now with the snow. Normally it's around eye level, so a good few feet of snow here at the summit. No wind up here, thankfully. The other 2 mountains were pretty windy, but yeah, nice winter wonderland again up here. All these trees just caked with powder, and so much powder. Fantastic day here on Marcy, Skylight, and Gray. Now we have the nice long trek back to the Adirondack Lodge. However, there are 2 other mountains that are close by from here. Gray had the perfect temperatures and the perfect vibe today. Clear sky, warm, sunny, and it was before noon. My goal is always to summit all of the peaks of the day before noon, and once again, we accomplished that goal. Of course, we still had a good 8 miles back to the lodge, but we're on top of Gray right now, so we don't think about that right now. We'll save that evil for later. Speaking of later, the first time I hiked Marcy, Skylight, and Gray, I spontaneously decided while standing on Marcy, which was the final peak of the day that day, to go back down and add Cliff and Redfield to the day. So to say the thought of doing that again didn't cross my mind would be a lie. As I stood up on top of Gray, looking at the beautiful sunny sky around me, I looked at my watch. Not even noon yet. And about the same time of day as it was last time, and I'm even closer to them now because I'm on Gray as opposed to Marcy. So I thought about it some more, knowing Jonathan also mentioned the idea of it. But thank God I came to my senses quickly and said, no way. Jonathan, Cliff and Redfield now?
Yeah. Can we hit Marshall too?
All right, we're going to add Cliff and Redfield now since I did it last time, and why the hell not? Just kidding. I am absolutely not going to do Cliff and Redfield again. But maybe when we get down to Lake Colden, I'll decide. After another 20 or 25 minutes, we started our fast descent down this peak, which involved a large amount of powdery butt sliding and skiing on our snowshoes. Nice and fast and without issue once again. And before we knew it, we saw the lake tier of the clouds and we were back to the Marcy Trail. The 0.5 miles off of Gray was complete. Now time to descend exactly 1,000 feet over 1.1 miles down to Lake Colden. We'd been out hiking at this point for over 9 hours already, and we still had over 7 miles still to go to get back to the car. So this was the point in the day where it was quiet. The 3 of us were just walking, no conversations, all of us lost in thought in our own heads for a good 10 minutes as we cruised down the soft, fluffy trail towards Colden. And this was another trail that was so much faster in the winter today than it is in the summer, not having to deal with all the rocks, roots, and boulders on this trail. We made it down to the Feldspar Lean-To and Feldspar Brook, marking the junction with the Lake Arnold Trail, over 6 miles back to the lodge. But to the left, only half a mile was the start of Cliff and Redfield. So I thought about it again. Maybe? We're here. Let's just do it. Why not? But then again, I came to my senses, fortunately said no. Thank God. My feet thanked me. It was at this point, however, where the one set of snowshoe tracks that we had been following today went left instead of right. So they went left towards Cliff and Redfield and then around to the other side of Lake Colden. And then the Lake Arnold Trail, which to the right, completely covered in snow and not broken out. Well, At this point in the day, and with 6 miles still to go, needless to say, we were not